All right, the watch list for Wednesday, which will be June 1st. Wow, all right, so here we go. You can see the SPY is kind of hanging out right around the top of this trend line. Trend lines aren't always perfect, and I could probably redraw it to where it touches this one, but I mean, you're basically at the top of a trend line. We'll see. We'll see what happens. It gapped up today. Looked like it was going to run. You could see the sellers right here. Look at those little topping tails, and then it just fell apart. And so as not to make life easy for shorts either, had a nice afternoon rally. So, I just play it on a day-by-day basis as long as I know where the overall market is, and I'm not fighting the current, if you will. So here's what I have for Wednesday. CLRB, just still in this flag pattern. No trades in it today. Goes back on watch for tomorrow. It's kind of the same with W. W's really close to a potential breakout here. The high back here, 41.33. The high today, 41.31. So let's just put 41.34 as a potential breakout right through the 200-day. I mean, it closed above the 200-day today. That's definitely one to watch. It can move pretty well when it moves. This OPGN, still, this huge volume spike still isn't a million shares. So that'll tell you how thin this stock is. But it had a nice pop. Did a little reading on this one, and it looks like Merck has a position in this, and there was some insider buying recently as well. So the news on this one, the news flow is kind of interesting. So I want to watch this one for a potential red to green, something like that tomorrow. You might get, and it's a pretty low float stock, so that's one that might get a follow through day tomorrow. That's OPGN, APHB. You had the pop here, flag, and then a second pop, so it kind of feels like chasing already, but it's had nice volume on both of these pops. Maybe a red to green in that one tomorrow. NEOT, this is actually a pretty handsome chart right here. You had the huge gap down. You got this kind of long base. And if I zoom in a little bit, you kind of have a little cup and handle. And this also could be construed as a handle in a bigger cup and handle, and certainly has a gap above. So if you get up into that gap, this one might just squeeze. And I zoom in now so you can see it a little better. So you had this spike back here, a couple weeks ago, went to 142. Today it also hit 142, so this one very interesting, over 142. I'm going to put 1.43 in my notes right now. And you had this spike back here, which was 156. So if we can get up over 142 and then maybe get through 156, you look to the left again, or I'm sorry, get through 156, you look to the left again, and the highs from this whole consolidation, this whole, I don't know, you want to call this a big island down here or whatever, the highs at 188, and over that you're into the gap. So a fairly coiled setup here. I kind of like this one. So I have 143 in my notes. NERV, you had the big spike, had an inside red day. If you watched the video from this weekend, this was on watch for today. I actually made a call in this one today when it looked just like this. So the reason I called it was you had the huge day last week, right? And then on Friday you had the quiet inside day, and then today you had a little bit of a gap up, and it was really holding that $11 area well. I almost called it after it spiked up here. I almost called it over the high of this spike, but then what I like to do is look for things that have another catalyst pretty close above on the chart. Okay, so that's why after this climb I didn't feel like I was chasing, because it consolidated for a while, and if you broke this little flag, you have a very good chance that, now you're much closer to a red to green and high of day. When I say red to green, by the way, I mean through the open today, not through yesterday's close. So I simply called this long at 11.58 over this little consolidation, because I figured if it got up here, that's pretty close to a high of day break, which was pretty close to Friday's high. So you have what I call stacked catalysts, right? And a pretty clear place to put a stop too, just below this little base. So I called it 11.58 with an 11.38 stop. There's the pop. It gave you another little flag even closer to the high of the day, and ended up grinding all the way up to 12.47, about 89 cent move in our favor on 20 cents risk. It's back on watch today because the daily, it still hasn't taken out the highs from the gap up day, but you know what? Right now, bulls are in charge, right? Everyone who came in as a seller on Friday, they're all underwater if they're still short. So keep that in mind. So it goes back on watch, maybe a red to green, something like that tomorrow. VSLR. This one broke yesterday's high, but again, I don't like to chase. And when something's already made a big percentage move, I don't like to chase. But, I'd like to see this come in another day or maybe two, but I'm already going to start watching it tomorrow for a possible trade to the long side, because, that was really big volume on Friday. and this one might have some more upside in it. All right, so that's that one. BOSC. Now you talk about chasing. I don't want to chase. This one had a huge move today, and gave back some of it at the end of the day. But this one is one of those that maybe not tomorrow, but I want to keep this on watch for a week. Anytime you get a stock that, let's see, last week, one of the days it traded 15,000 shares, right? And that means just had no volume at all. It's a very low float stock. All of a sudden, out of the blue, gets 20 million shares. As a day trader, we can make some really good money on this over the next few days with a proper setup. So, I don't want to just ignore it, even though I feel like it's extended. And I doubt that tomorrow will be the day we catch a nice trade in it, but sometimes that happens. Sometimes you get a gap down and then a red to green or something along those lines. You just get a narrow range for the first hour and then an upside break. You never know what it's going to do, but having it on a chart doesn't cost me anything, and it might give me a nice trade. SODA gapped up, and this is that soda stream where you can make soda in your house. Well, then I think they got coming out with something where you can make beer in your house, and if that's not a good headline for a stock, I don't know what is. But anyway, ever since earnings, it's done a nice job consolidating. If I'd have seen this coming into today, I probably would have had this on watch anyway. It wouldn't have mattered because it gapped up. But it's really held these gains nicely from earnings. And then you had we'll call it the beer gap. It never did give me an entry today. I was watching it as a gap play, but it gapped up and then just chopped around the rest of the day after selling off a bit. It's kind of interesting over $21 because it couldn't get through that today. But really, I'm not going to say that if it gets through 21, I'm a buyer, right? I'll have to see how things trade. But sometimes you get a gap up, sellers come in, and the very next day it rips. So that one goes on watch, all right? Abercrombie & Fitch, ANF, gap down last week, and you've got a couple more red days now. I mean, I'd certainly like to see it get down to these lows where it had this island reversal, but it doesn't have to. So this one just goes back on bounce watch. No trades in it today. It was on bounce watch today. It didn't give me a setup. And then lastly, and I'm going to give you a caution with this one, SRPT had the gap up last week, and now you're 3 days lower. But I don't know if there's a decision coming out, FDA decision coming out on this that's imminent. I haven't done any research on it. I'm a day trader, so that's important to know. All right, like say a decision is tomorrow's Wednesday. Say there's a decision scheduled for Thursday, and again, I have no clue if there is, but you want to be really careful with this one because sometimes these things will get halted in the middle of a session, and then you're just stuck in it until after the decision. So do some due diligence on that one, all right, if you're going to trade it. But with all that aside, the chart is interesting because you had the pop back here, and you've got a few days lower. So it's a pretty good setup for a bounce play, all right? We will add some gappers in the morning as well. We'll work together to decipher what looks like a good morning potential gap play, and that's a big enough list for me to handle as it is. So enjoy the rest of your night, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.